Well, hi everyone, and welcome to Ask and Wonder, the show that brings Christians and skeptics together to talk about the big questions in life. Today we have a very interesting topic, and the topic is a life with God and a life without it. So today is going to be a very engaging, honest, challenging, and friendly conversation about the big questions in life. And for this, I'm going to be the Christian representative. And I have the honor to invite a friend, Jim Grinstead, with us. And he's going to be the secular or atheist thinker in our conversation. So before we start the conversation, as you always know, if you would like to connect with Ask and Wonder, you can do it by sending an email to me at askandwondernashville@gmail.com. And you can also go to the website, askandwonder.com. And just know that it's going to be, of course, a video on YouTube, but you can also listen to it on a podcast version as well. And well, I'm excited about this. Jim, thank you very much for being with me today.
I'm honored that you'd have me on the show. I really look forward to our conversation. I think it could be fun.
Yes, I think it's going to be fun as well. So yes, let's just start. Let's just jump right in. So Jim, would you tell us a little bit about your story in terms of pondering and reflecting about the big questions in life? Have you always been an atheist, or at one point in your life you considered yourself a believer?
I was raised in the Christian church, Disciples of Christ, and I clearly remember when I was extremely young, my mom told me there was no Santa Claus. And, that has to happen at some point. And I remember starting to ask, is there no God? And because both had never manifest themselves, but there was something inside me that says, don't ask that question. People build churches, they do a lot of things. So I figured, well, stay away from that for a while.
Hmm.
As time went along, I mean, I never felt religious. I got baptized because it was the time in my life when I was supposed to do that. But I never found this bond, and it just never came to me. For a while, I worked for an organization that did relief work and was over in the Middle East in Bethlehem,
Oh, wow.
and went to the church where supposedly Christ was born,
Mm.
and supposedly looked at the place where it happened, which of course we can't know. But uh, other than the beauty of the cathedral and the stained glass and everything else, I didn't feel particularly moved other than uh, knowing the history of the locations. So um, that was internalized. And it wasn't until probably 10 years or so ago that I just said, okay, I'm an atheist. Let's just call it that and be there and accept that.
Mm. Well, that's very interesting. What would you say, Jim? What would you say? Um, what was the thing that made you actually arrive to the conclusion? For example, it was perhaps the lack of evidence. Was it the way people that claim to be Christians, a follower of Christ, uh, were doing things that you didn't consider Christ-like? What was for you the thing or the things that actually made you reconsider your faith at the moment?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd say reconsider because I
Yeah,
never really had it.
definitely.
But yeah, it's going to be the same thing you hear from most atheists is, why is there evil in the world? Why do
Mm,
bad things happen to good people and vice versa? Why is there starvation and it's located only in certain portions of the world? All those things just, of course, don't make sense. And so you look at it that way, and I just like, well, okay, nobody's got the answers to these questions, so ergo, accept it, move on. But
mhm.
if somebody ever to come up and prove it to me that there is a God, I'd absolutely stand up and say I was wrong.
Yeah, yeah. So, for example, that is a very interesting topic, It's a difficult one, a very interesting one when we talk about evil. Once you considered, um, I'm an atheist, there's no God, the evil didn't go away. So the evil just stayed. That didn't change. So now in your life, Jim, when you experience evil or what you see when you see evil around you, how do you how do you deal with it? How do you experience it? What things comfort you?
That's that is a difficult question because I see the same things you see in terms of bad things happening, and it's I tend to jump in there too often and try to interfere and stop them. But it's beyond my ability other than to use the resources in place, such
Mm,
as police protection and those sorts of things. But clearly, on a global scale, mine I'm not going to make much of a difference there.
mm,
Um, as to how I feel about it, you know, I would like to think that evil is a presence and a thing, but
mm,
that would make it supernatural, and of course that's not, to me anyway. That's not what it is. I think I've had to come down to the thought that either well, and ethics and those sorts of things don't matter to some people, or just like we break a leg, sometimes we have malfunctions in the brain, and that causes some of that.
mm,
And uh, I saw a woman the other day not wearing a mask, and I asked her to, and her only uh, defense was that it's not illegal, and the moral and ethical aspects of it didn't concern her at all. And so I thought, that's a pretty vacant way to live.
mm, mm. Yeah, I understand. Definitely, the first thing that comes to mind, I remember when I was an atheist myself, Jim, and I was thinking about this particular problem, which I definitely consider a problem. It's still a problem today as a follower of Christ, meaning it's the evil gets to certain levels, not only outside of me, but internally. I can recognize the things that I'm capable of. Um, and it's not it's not something to be entertained, and it's definitely something that makes me sad just to see the things that happen around us, and the things of course that I've done in the past, and the things that I have the potential to do. So when
Uh,
you know that there is a
May I turn this around for something?
yes,
Um, you'd asked me when my revelation was. We had talked about your revelation was at the Temple of the Mount. Am I correct?
the Sermon of the Mount, yes.
Yeah, Sermon on the Mount. What was it about that that convinced you otherwise? And do you remember the moment
Yes,
that it fell into place and you went, "Yes, that's it."
that's a very good question, Jim. So, what happened, first of all, before I got to the Sermon of the Mount, I, like you, said, you know what? The actual belief in God or gods, or the actual belief that there's something meaningful beyond the things that we can tangibly experience, uh, I need to know if that is rational or not. Because perhaps I'm just going to investigate this, and it just by nature is just an irrational thought. So for me, the first thing I did was to investigate a little bit Western civilization and Western thought, starting from the pre-Socratics, philosophers before Socrates, and just moving forward till today. And one thing I realized, there were incredible thinkers, both people that believed at that point in something beyond. They were not believers in the God of the Bible, just to put it this way. And then at one point, definitely when Jesus was on earth, from that point on, you find also philosophers in a tradition where actually were also very intelligent people that would defend uh, the rationality behind a belief in God.
Mhm.
Also, I saw some atheist thinkers and philosophers that when treating the question about the existence of God, they were not being dismissive about this. They were saying, in general fashion, this was my understanding. Sorry, I don't believe in God. I don't know how irrational that belief is. So that's why I'm actually interacting with it, and that has happened to many philosophers throughout history that were not believers have interacted with the idea. I'm thinking if these idea were completely rational, I don't know if people would have spent the time that it was spent. Well, at the same time, perhaps that's not a good answer because many people were believers throughout history, so people had to talk about it.
Sure.
Now, that was kind of all my thinking because I want to always be fair. I want to I believe in this, but I want to be fair into, it's just not believe because I believe and that's it. That at least was my approach. Then, of course, at the scientific level, when I realized that when we explain something, we're actually just describing something that is just out there. Like we're not actually giving an objective explanation of what something is. We're just describing something that is already there. That is the beautiful limitation of science, which is science is allowing us to explain the world in beautiful ways at the descriptive level, but not at the objective level. So I realized that as well because I thought that there was I thought there was a false dichotomy there. Like there was science and reason, then science and faith and all of this. So that I put it aside. I realized that there wasn't any conflicts at all. And then when I got to the Sermon of the Mount, just to answer your question, just so that you and people understand what my journey took me, when I got to the Sermon of the Mount, the way Jesus was talking about the human reality, the human predicament, the way life should be understood, that there is something beyond the things that we do, that when we do evil starts even before we actually enact it. Like it starts with our thoughts, the inner attitude. And the Sermon of the Mount is incredibly rich, but empty at the level of theology. There's no theology there. It's just, this is the way, this is the attitude, this is the way you should live your life. Of course, the theology comes because just a little bit in terms of the eschatology, like there's an end to it.
Mhm.
You behave like this because there's something coming. But then in terms of the understanding that what happens with Paul in the letters and all of that, you don't see that in the Sermon on the Mount. It's just simple, treat people the way you would like to be treated. That was even pushed even forward. Love your enemies. Very incredible statement. It's still people trying, and me as well, trying to understand all of this. And definitely when I realized that after saying all those things, he was calling himself God, and then at the same time, at the level of history, I think it happened, he actually resurrected and finished the problem for humanity and creation itself, which is people and things dissipate and die. All of these things happened with only one person, and was the same person that told the Sermon of the Mount. That was for me kind of the moment I said, I would follow this person even though he wouldn't call himself God, but he actually called himself God, and at the same time he resurrects. Then the history of what happens after 2,000 years after he was here on earth, that gave me some reassurance. There's something going on here. So that was kind of the way I got to the moment of the Sermon on the Mount. It's the attitude of the heart. What do you think about all of that?
Well, it's interesting because it seems as if you were preparing yourself for that final act, that you'd done the research and looked around and tried to understand its evolution and these sorts of things, that you now had the knowledge and the skill to analyze arguments,
Mm.
so that when you arrived at that location, you had the opportunity to have, I hate to use the word revelation, but a connection with the simplicity of it all.
Mm,
That really was people eating together, trying to be good, trying to figure out ways to be good to one another,
mhm.
and live the kind of lives that everybody wanted to live in. It was just
Yeah.
a good life. Am
Mm.
I reading you correctly?
Well, yes. Now, at the same time, um, just stripping away the ethical, moral teacher that many people want to find in Jesus, Jim, from the facts that he was doing miracles, that he was calling himself God, that he kind of changed and revolutionized the history of Western civilization. Those things for me are important. Definitely, you, although you don't like using the word revelation is very important for those of us who believe, because I couldn't have known any of these things if he hadn't told me or told us. You know.
Mhm. Yeah, one of the things I had that concerns me about religion
Yeah.
is that it prevents people from seeing things as they really are, and that kind of gets
Mm.
to the topic of why you and I are talking today.
Yes.
I thought you were probably going to start out saying, "So, how is your life different from mine?" And I was going to say they're the same because we're both experiencing the same thing. We
Hmm.
see the same stuff. You just have different things that you do during the week. Do I?
Mm.
And otherwise, they're both the same. Um, so I about a year, no, 2 years ago, I went over to Vanderbilt to listen to a theology student do his dissertation defense on helping people at the time of their death to actually come to grips with things that could help them relieve pain or do anything, where the religion says, nope. They turn to that and say, if this is what God wants or whatever the religion is, then I'm just going to surrender and accept it. And so his study was to try to figure out how to help people in those situations. And I thought that typifies the 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 clouding of reality when somebody says, "I prefer the unknown to the known,"
Mm.
when I know what the result of that's going to be.
Mm. That's very interesting. You know what? The when you're talking about, like clouding reality
Mhm,
and how religion could do that, that's a fair assessment, I would say. I mean, it can do that. My first comment about this, and something that I liked about the Gospels, is how Jesus spends so much time talking to the religious people of the time, just letting them know that they were not doing a good job. That was something that for me it really helped me put things in perspective. This would take us a little bit to another conversation, but I don't know. Uh, you know, I don't know if what Jesus was talking about what could be considered for me at this moment, with my short understanding, a religion as it is understood, at least in our civilization nowadays, Western civilization. But one thing that I wanted to ask you about. So you and I live a similar life. I agree, up to one extent, definitely. We
yeah.
experience love, we experience death, we experience pain, we experience all of, definitely. Now, there is something that I would say is different, and it's clearly different. Now, I look around, I see, for example, there's something rather than nothing. I think
Mhm.
we both agree on that. Sometimes,
I hope so.
yeah,
If
you know,
not, we
so
just go back and watch The Matrix here.
yes, yes. So we both agree that there's something. That's the first for me. That's the first thing that I always go back to that question, meaning, okay, um, there's something. This something seems to be ordered. We know this because of all the empirical method, and there's some history there about how people got to the conclusion that they were expecting law because there was a lawgiver that was a little bit that happens in science. But well, so there's a reality out there. Using, for example, the method in science, the more we do science, Jim, the more order we're finding.
Mhm.
There's a system to things, you know. Now, with all these, let's call it evidence for the sake of this is neutral evidence, or actually I would say better than evidence, data. Neutral. This is data. Now we come with this data, Jim, we read it, we interpret it, and then we make an assumption. This data might be saying this, might be saying that. So when you talk about clouding reality, would it be possible that that could be happening too to uh, atheists at that in that respect?
No, I absolutely get what you're saying. That it's hard not to listen to a certain piece of music that touches you without feeling a connection to ages and the composer and the performer. Sunsets, if you're looking at something of great beauty with somebody else, it's hard to not feel that there's a shared experience there that happens without electricity or wires or anything else.
Hmm.
Uh, it's there. But it's the kind of like the watchmaker argument
Yeah.
that if you go through the woods and find a watch, then there go, it must be a watchmaker somewhere.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think that we can have emotions, we can react to something. We grow up and age with shared experiences and things that we expect to find beauty in. If we see a sunset over the Grand Canyon, um, there will be some people that go, I've seen sunsets before, but other people who will be truly touched by it because of the majesty and the size of it all. And the fact that a lot of us share that emotion, I don't think is particularly uncommon or unusual.
Mm. So uh, after 4 centuries, more or less, just for example, doing science and discovering things about the world, the final, well, not I wouldn't say final, the momentaneous conclusion for many secular thinkers is, we just don't know. So we just don't know what this is. I sometimes wonder, and I think this is a very interesting question. Up, what would secular thinkers or atheists like you would need in order to make the step beyond we just don't know? Because the same 400 centuries that I could use, for example, as a Christian to say, wow, there's a God. That same data has been collected for you to actually read it, but it seems that this data hasn't led you and many other thinkers and friends to say, well, there's something. It doesn't have to be God, though. There's something else. It seems to end up always being the point of we just don't know. We just don't know. We just don't know. So what is the expectation of, for example, of what we're going to find, or what does all these things that we have found say to you as a whole in reality?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be talking in generalities by the
Yes,
nature
yes,
of the thing. So let's just put that out there for the listeners and viewers, just so they know we get that.
definitely.
Um, it, I don't know that I have an expectation of something.
Mm,
I really enjoy the journey and learning about how science is able to tease out the little parts of the universe and quantum mechanics, which don't ask me to even think about explaining.
yeah, don't
Uh,
ask me either.
but I do like string theory, just because of its beauty and its simplicity. And that gets back to what you're saying about systems and things working in harmony together.
Mm,
Um, but on the other hand, that has to happen for us to exist and for the world to be there. If there were not that interconnection with things, um, we wouldn't be here, or would be in a different form or
mm,
something else. So, uh, I see no problem with having something that's there and needing to find a reason that connects it or pulls it together or that sort of thing. Yeah, I get where people say we just don't know, but I think that the question assumes that there is a need to connect it, to give it meaning, to give it some kind of structure. And I don't think it necessarily has to do that. I asked,
No.
we went to Vanderbilt. I spent a lot of time over there because I can get a free education. And a woman from NASA was there. And I asked her, if we find life on another planet, how will we know what it is? And she said, we have no idea. It could be any number of different forms and that sort of thing. Um, but you keep looking.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that question about the question about ultimate reality is a question that always makes me feel, it's a very strange line between comfortable and uncomfortable. It's very cool because um, definitely the data, just to put it neutrally, I hope it's working. That we all collect is that there's something, right? And sometimes I wonder up to what point a person needs to get in order to realize, to not just take it for granted, right? Just to be open that um, there must be perhaps a reason for it, and what is the nature of that reason. I know that at the philosophical level, the facts that I could expect that there is a reason for everything could be disputed. I understand that, but that is just the way we are. We just collect data, and then we just cover it with our worldview and see if it does make sense or not.
Yeah, but we don't. With that data, we structure that within our own. I don't want to say prejudices, but our own
Yeah.
outlook.
Hmm.
Uh, for example, I learned back in high school of all places. What if God was a first cause? You know, you think about the Newton's cradle, if you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, the
Hmm.
things that balls that something has to pick up the ball and let it go.
Yeah.
So what if God is nothing more than the first cause, and that's the end of God's influence in our society? What if God just doesn't care? What if he just created us for whatever reason and has moved off to other things?
Mm.
Those I think are important questions, and again,
Yes.
that gets back to my uh, people clouding reality and not asking those questions. How many people ask, where did the Bible come from?
Mm.
Who put these books together
Mm.
and decided it was going to become the Bible? And I have never heard of anyone asking that question. People as I grew up, they just weren't even curious about it. Um, they generally stay in, people generally stay in the church in which they were raised. And yet, I would think with something like eternity on the line, that you'd shop around a little bit anyway, just to see what's going on. So I struggle to try to attach a meaning or a structure to it because I think that, and again, is a construct we bring upon it, as opposed to sitting back and asking themselves, what are the various possibilities? It's not either this belief or no belief. It could be anything in between, and it doesn't necessarily have to involve a supernatural being.
Yeah, definitely agree with you, Jim, in the sense of, for example, that there should be kind of a, I don't know if it's a healthy one, but well, there should be an expectation of people that are talking constantly about eternity, right? You should see it more. It should be clear in the way people live their lives. I agree completely with that, but that's parts of the revelation that I consider divine, because it was very well defined, the problem with the human hearts. Definitely the parts of um, realizing, sorry, just asking those questions that you were mentioning. Where does the Bible come from? and who has put these books together. I mean, people should ask those questions more often, but that doesn't entail that people haven't asked those questions before. And definitely, those questions have been asked continually throughout the centuries, and it seems that the result seems to be that people keep believing. Now, in these conversations with when I talked with my atheist friends, usually I approach the conversation through the evidentialist approach. Let's just see evidence and see where we go. I don't think I'm starting to realize that I don't think that that's fair for me, not for the conversation, but for me, because when an atheist friend looks at the world with the lack of belief in a God, that is actually uh, entailing a worldview. That's the way I
Yeah.
see it. The Bible does that for me, not the Bible, the book itself, but what is contained there,
Yeah.
which I consider
The
definitely
philosophy.
the Word of God. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, uh, in terms of what happens with the book itself, those are good questions. I think those questions are beautifully answered. And my last comment, I'll let you say something and ask me questions if you want to, is that's the beauty of it, I would say. And Jesus puts it with an analogy with kids. Like, we don't have to be incredible thinkers, or in order to just to believe in this beauty that is here, partially here, and is fully about to come. So like we a person doesn't need to ask those questions. It's like, for example, you can think about a person being born in Switzerland or Spain, my home country. It's a highly secular country where any questions concerning this spirituality, up to one level, people consider them stupid, silly. Let's not talk about them. And the same question could be asked when you put all the things that we know about the universe, the way it works, the facts that we exist, our emotions, and how the world works. We could ask the same question: how is it possible that people are not even wondering about the meaning of reality itself? What do you think
But
about all of that?
yeah, I think the church is actually complicit in that. Uh, in the people I've been around and the churches I've attended, I have never seen a case where a pastor acknowledges that the Bible is not the Word of God, because we can't assume that every translation and that sort of thing is accurate, um, and that we don't know entirely who wrote the Bible, that other people did that, and to to educate those in the congregation about what the realities are of religion, and what what things we just don't know, what things we do know, and what is faith, and have everybody acknowledge the fact that yes, there's no proof of this, but I have faith that it's true, and that's fine. I think that's an honest way to look at it. Necessarily, I don't want to import realistic on it, but I honest way to do that. And I think the people of faith are missing an opportunity in that, because most discussions between atheists and people of faith come down to the person of faith saying that well, God works in mysterious ways, or we can't possibly understand the mind of God. But if you look at it, that we we see things differently. The honest truth is a lot of things can't be explained, and so that's fine. But rather than hit this wall that seems impenetrable, why couldn't people of faith simply go, yeah, we know all this evidence is not out there. We know there's trouble and evil in the world. We know bad things happen to good people, and good people can rise to the occasion. And we don't have all the answers, but we believe. It's our faith. And that puts it on a ground where people are saying, yes, I get the reality of this. I understand the disconnect. but I believe this. So that's somewhat as you came into it. You found your path um, to a point where you were able to embrace inconsistencies and not let those trouble you.
Hmm. Well, there is a few things that you said there that were interested, because of course in your conversation I understand that, because that's your worldview. In your conversation, you're assuming that um, people believe the way you put it. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you correct me, Jim, if I'm not saying it well. But like, people get to believe without evidence, and there's no proof. At that definition of faith is not the definition that appears in the New Testament from the word pistis in Greek, that means trust. The way I understand faith is something that you believe in because you have evidence for it. I don't think that in any moment that I have spent time reading the Word of God, I have understood believe as something that starts from a vacuum. I don't understand it that way. Also, these things that you mentioned about, it would be amazing to go to a church and hearing people saying, "Hey, we just don't know. There's no proof." The examples that you gave, I definitely don't agree with. We don't know who wrote the Bible and all of this. I don't agree. Now, there's a thing that you're saying that I would agree with, which is I agree with you. There are actually, I hope you're okay with this. I'm going to be sharing because this is my worldview. There are actually some conversations, beautiful conversations of verses in the Bible that actually are telling us that we cannot know everything. That is the nature of being a believer. That is biblical to the core. There are things that we can know because they were revealed to us. There are things that have been invited to us to consider. Why are we finding order in the world? Oh, because there's a mind beyond it. Okay, we get that. Now, the process in which those two things connect at a metaphysical level, we just don't know. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, so
Yeah,
there.
I see it. Let's go ahead.
So what I want to say is definitely the 2 points are: faith is not blind faith. We might see it sometimes, not only from the Christian worldview, from many other worldviews. It happens to, in a secular worldview, it could happen to as well. This is something because the common denominator ends up being not the belief itself, or the religion itself, or the philosophy itself, or the system of thought itself, but it's actually rooted in humanity. That's why, for example, the problem of evil it stopped being like a huge. It's a problem, but not a huge one anymore, because when you actually trace back, the majority of the things that happen in the world originate in the human heart. It's just what it is. So definitely. Don't agree with the assumption that just going to people and say, okay, there's no proof for this. We don't have any evidence. If that were the case, I think there would be uh, a like less believers in the world. I think that's not the case. I do agree with the fact that at certain points there should be more humility, because that is biblical. To the point of, think about this, Jim, in the secular worldview, science seems to be a very important source of knowledge, which is for everyone, I would say. But for secular people, atheists, it's very important. But when people say, God works in mysterious ways, and you go, okay, well, you could say that at any time that you don't understand something. Think about this, Jim. Every single time a scientist, or you hear scientists talking, people, incredibly intelligent people talking about science, let's say, like physicists are talking about energy all the time, they don't have any idea of what energy is. Mathematicians are interacting with mathematics all the time. They have no idea what mathematics is. we biologists are talking about genes, are talking about at the molecular level and cells. They have no idea of what a cell is. The only thing that we are doing is to describe what is happening. And of course, from that we make a worldview out of it. And definitely not the world works in mysterious ways. We could say exactly the same thing. So it should be humble from both perspective, I would say.
Oh
What do you
yeah,
think about
that's a lot of stuff to unpack there. I think we're probably closer on one issue, and I did a bad job of explaining evidence.
that?
Um, I can absolutely see that somebody could have an experience or see something that for them uh, creates a worldview or a feeling. It doesn't have to be hard evidence, but that is the evidence.
Mm,
So I won't take that away from them. I don't want to take that away from them. But there are two classes of evidence,
mm,
and one really comes down to an opinion or a feeling, and is a matter of faith, while the other works more on things that can be duplicated or described. And I like that. I'm going to come back to that here in a second. So if well, let me go on and do the described. I started out a long time ago enjoying wine, and it's like you go to the store, you don't know what to buy, and so you go out and taste it. And you ask somebody, "Is this any good?" They go, but you really haven't learned anything about it. But when you go out to the vineyards and you see the grapes and how they're grown and the difference in taste between those on the floor and those on the shoulder of a mountain and those up on this side and the direction the wind comes, and you begin to taste it, you're able to parse out the elements of the wine.
mm,
But just to tell somebody, yeah, this is a good wine, it doesn't help them any. So if I say, well, it's got some tannins to it, a bit of leather on the background, the cherry is there, it's definitely a fruit forward sort of wine, we're describing something. And
mhm,
that's really the only way we can communicate and get on the same page.
mm,
The fact that mathematics is a descriptor is fine with me because that
mm.
helps understand the world. But to say mathematics has to be something, well, I don't know that it does. I recoiled in horror a few weeks ago when my brother, a former accountant and math teacher, and my niece, a math teacher, told me there are many different kinds of infinity.
Mhm.
I have yet to get that through my thick head. Uh, It's like to me, infinity is infinity. I mean,
Yeah,
but apparently not. So,
yeah, yeah.
uh,
That's very interesting. You were mentioning about differences of different types of evidence,
mhm,
and that's actually a very good conversation because I would say at the scientific level, when we talk about proof is something that can actually be mimicked and reinstated to get the same results. It's something. It's just proof. Is just you can tangibly see it. Evidence is different in the sense that evidence is leading you to make a conclusion.
mhm,
Um, and I think yeah, it depends on worldviews because you would ask someone um, where does the universe come from, and I'm not looking for the explanation of this singularity and the few milliseconds, even
mhm,
10 to the minus 34 milliseconds before or after the Big Bang. I'm not talking about that's the descriptor, that is description of it, right? I'm talking about the being, the ontology, the metaphysics of it, the why before it, the why, the reason. Those questions, those questions just still remain there. And even when things are being described, the question remain, why are things the way they are? those questions just remain there. Definitely, I agree. Well, I would
Yeah,
add to
but
this.
I don't think that church leaderships do their congregations any favors by not exposing them to the ideas of what we don't know and
I agree with
what's
you.
not there. And if they could see that, I think it would really give them power and hopefully, not hopefully, but enhance their faith. And because they would feel like they have control over what's going on, will acknowledge that this is just what I believe. And that would give them a solid platform on which they can go through life. Um, but not telling people leaves them to not see reality and not understand how their beliefs differ and why their beliefs should take them a certain way and reject other paths.
Hmm.
Uh, it doesn't
What
give
are
them
the
hope.
things? What are the things, Jim? Just to be more specific, what are the things that if were the case that you were a pastor,
Mhm.
what would what were sorry um what things would you tell to people that you're not hearing? Could you be more specific about that?
Sure, I think in Scripture, um, rather than going to Sunday school and just memorizing some scripture and songs and that sort of thing, I think I'd start out by just here's the Bible and here's how it came to be. And Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John did not write these books, and they had never met Jesus and that sort of thing. And
Wow. Okay.
so
Yeah,
give them
that
the
that definitely wouldn't be in this story. Then you wouldn't be a pastor, I would say. Yeah,
I would
definitely
be
not.
welcome to go out the door.
Yes, but yeah, I get the point. Just continue.
Yeah, I just that way, if it's the inspired word of God, then why isn't it the same thing for Islam and Buddhism and a host of other religions? And is it the King James Bible? Is that the one, or is it the Catholic Bible, or other things? There are things that folks are going to encounter in the world because it's there, and if they're curious enough to explore it, um, I think they should have the ability to understand why it's there and why there are differences and help them find a path to understand why they're going where they are with knowledge of how it's what it's based upon.
Mm,
Otherwise, it's just seeing things through a narrow prism. You've only been taught these are certain scriptures, these are certain hymns. We don't ask ourselves hard questions. Again, my experience in churches is that they don't want that, and I don't think the congregation necessarily wants that either. Are our pastors doing a good job of informing them about the religion and helping them deal with it by just excluding so many things that we know and important?
yeah. that, that is yes. I mean, in that sense, what you're saying about facing the hard questions, the big questions in life, I definitely agree with you. Now, in the sense of the expectations as to how the evidence would lead people to think that this example that you gave, that the Gospels were written not by the apostles. We don't know who wrote them and all of that. I thought the analogy was going to be like, I accept all of that, therefore now I'm going to push people to do these questions, these hard questions. But um, I get the point. I do get the point about that, and definitely the churches are not magical places. Churches is the church actually, according to the New Testament, is not the building, but the people. And the New Testament talks beautifully about the brokenness of the human heart, which is something that we all see. We all see. I think. I mean, definitely, someone could say, "I don't think it's that way," but we were talking about the problem of evil, and it's just there. Uh, Now, in terms of um, in terms of applying the same system of thoughts that you might be expecting from churches to the secular world, I think that would be I think that would be also interesting. Let me ask you a question. Is
Sure.
there something that the secular world could be doing better, that you could expect that they would be doing better in order to bring more, I don't know, conversations and meaning to our lives? What would you say on the other side of
Yeah.
the coin?
Well, again, we're talking in generalities, so
Of
we'll
course, of
just
course.
keep that. But it's not like secular folks and atheists get together on Saturday afternoon and go to the bar and talk about these things.
Yeah.
We're all individuals. We don't have a belief in a God, and that is all. That's the common thing, but it doesn't mean we get together and deal with it. So when you ask, what can we do better? We're really asking what each person can do better in their lives and in their situation and in their environment uh, to be better, as opposed to saying what can atheists as a whole do. It's not an organization that you pay dues to. Um, I think we do a better job of. I'm a huge believer in empathy, and if we can do a better job of being able to see our fellow human beings, understand what they're going through, understand their circumstances, and shut up and listen to what they describe, and give them a chance to outline their feelings. I think we could go a long way, but empathy seems to be lacking a lot these days. And if we can't empathize with one another, we can't help each other.
That is, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, definitely. Empathy is very important. Now, I always come to these thoughts, Jim. Let's imagine that we all put into practice the most beautiful level of empathy we can ever imagine,
Hmm.
but then we die.
Hmm.
Why? Why all this empathy if we there's a great unknown and life is ultimately meaningless? With all these questions, by the way, I'm not pushing you at all. I'm just expressing some of
Sure.
the questions I went through. Definitely, I just really want to have a nice conversation. If we put all this empathy into practice, but then at the end, the end is complete obliteration, like the elimination of any meaning that you have put towards it. Don't does it do does it do for you what it does for me, which is thinking, yeah, let's do it empathy because it actually ameliorates our lives, definitely. But what about ultimate reality? Like, I'm going to die, and all of this at one point is going to be meaningless. What about the people that deal with those questions? What would you say about that one?
Well, I understand it's a fair question. I mean, it's just the thought of dying one instance and then your whole body of experience and the kids you may have brought into the world and that sort of thing, uh, you no longer have contact with, but you also have no knowledge of it, so you don't suffer. Um, but there is a, a desire, I think, among everyone to find some kind of meaning or um, residual effect they can leave on the world in a positive way. I think for most, well, for me, I I'm okay with dying and having it all in there. I don't feel it has to mean anything. And an argument you've heard before is that life is what you make of it. Take advantage of it every single day and look where you find meaning there, because otherwise, why not just kill yourself and go be with God? And that's where things are supposed to be.
Yeah,
But that's not a good option either. Not one that I've ever heard a church espouse.
yeah,
And
because it's not
so
the call. Yeah, it's not the call at
yeah,
all.
it just doesn't make sense. So I think to expect some kind of other world, a heaven or whatever, uh, is logical if one feels that there has to be a depository for this or a way of carrying things forward. Um, but it's also just it's death. Things die, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah, that statement, uh, it's just, yeah, it's very, for me, that statement. I dealt with it, Jim, in the past,
Mhm.
and it brings me to such I don't know if it's sadness. Perhaps it's sadness.
Mhm.
The statement of you make of life. What is it again? How do you say it in English? You make whatever you can out of life.
Uh, you create the life you want to live,
Yeah.
and
So
that
that statement, for example, in order to create the life that you want to live, you have to first have life, and that is the problem. In order for us to do that, we just we seems that we take for granted the existence of life itself. And when we come to these questions, what do we do for people that, what do you do with those questions? You
well,
can take.
we've just changed sides. You're talking about the physical, and I'm talking about the spiritual.
Yeah, yeah.
in,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in the sense that of how you feel versus not. I think it was fun. I just had to have fun with that.
Oh, definitely. And that's what I'm saying. um how does an atheist friend come to terms with creating the life that one wants to create, but then at the same time, perhaps
Mhm.
taking for granted that in order for one to do that, you need to have light first. And like that question is just, it is so important. I don't know how. I understand how some people can live without seeking answers for that question, because reality is very in your face. You do things, you work, you talk, you there. It hurts. I smile.
Yeah.
I fall in love. It's very in your face, but at the same time, take it for granted that in order for that to be, we cannot take it for granted. What do you do with all of that? How do you bring meaning to things that by nature you know that one day, Jim, are going to end? It is very, it's a worldview that brings me. I think it's sadness. Perhaps there's another word for it, but it just brings me sadness. It's just a way to live. I don't know. What, would you have
Well,
any thoughts about that?
yeah, that brings us back to infinity, and
Yeah, yeah.
because it seems that if there's an ending at some point,
Mm,
but the world, universe, whatever continues to go on, this is just where we stop. Then logically, there should be a place on the other side that says this is where we start,
mm,
and there's an infinity line that goes off that way. So there is a before and an after, and we experience just a portion of it. Um, so it feels logical that there should be a beginning. Um, but we're all, to my way of thinking, we're all stardust. We are things that that came out of the earth for whatever reasons, and we can go back and look at, you know, comets, asteroids striking the earth, and that's how we get water and many things like that, and how they come together to make people and other life forms. Um, it may be completely different someplace else, but I think it was Gandhi that said, "Be the life you want to see." And so if you approach it that way and go, well, the important thing is to be the life, because once I'm gone, even if I'm in heaven, I can't do that. That is taken from me,
mm,
because it's a different paradigm.
mm,
So live now is to be the life you want to see is what we have. It's there, and if it ends when it ends, then we've done a pretty good job of getting what we could out of life.
mm.
If it goes on to something else, we still lived a good life.
Mm. Yeah, that is very interesting. I would like to give you, Jim, um, you got a minute to just to share your final thoughts. I would like to share mine first. We have been talking about. I mean, you've just. I'm thinking about Stardust and all of this, and interesting conversation definitely. And yeah, but that's a very different conversation. Now, one thing that we have been mentioning a lot in the conversations has been um, churches and what people say and do at churches and all of this. That happens. We see it's real. Good things, bad things. We see this not only in churches but in every single human being in the world. Now, for viewers, for those Christians and skeptics friends that are watching this or listening to this, the most important point for me to bring to just to emphasize at the end of this, I, for example, don't became a I didn't become a Christian because of church or because of what people at churches do. It was because of Jesus himself. Now, skeptics could go and atheist friends could go and see what Jesus said, and they perhaps don't like it, they criticize it, perhaps even to the point of hating what he did or said. Um, but I think that that would be for me the healthiest thing to do. When skeptics criticize the church, they're going to have reasons to do it, and that it's actually biblical. Churches are full of people that are broken with sin. That's the worldview. So the expectations of going to church and finding something um, it should be actually, it should be a bit different. I'll give you that. It should be different. So when you don't, when we don't see it, it's sad because the call is there and it's a huge call. It's a huge call. It's there and that's unmovable. No one is going to move it. So I would say again, the final point is um, when there are questions about Christianity, the questions come definitely from the Word of God, definitely from the Gospels and what Jesus said himself about the the meaning of reality itself and what he meant for all of that. But that is kind of in this a life without God and a life without this. That's kind of the point in which I would like to end it. Jim, your final thoughts for today's conversation. I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you so much for inviting me. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and being able to kind of challenge each other and no malice, no problem
Of
like that.
course.
And so I getting old, so I'm kind of losing my thoughts at times. But yeah, I think churches and people of faith are not getting the reality they need to fully embrace their faith. I may look something as a proof, um, as chemistry, and people of faith see other proofs, and I'm fine with that. I really have no problems with that. Um, but I don't think they're given a full insight into what they're being directed to, and that if they had that knowledge and that power, they could find their own faith in a stronger way and be able to defend it. And even though their proofs will be far different from mine, they will understand why they have that proof, why that proof is important to them. And there doesn't have to be an ending that God works in mysterious ways. The ending is these are the proofs that I have come to accept. And there are other things that don't conform to it. That's why they call it faith.
Mm.
So I think a good dose of reality without denying the feelings of the spiritual feelings is really important. And that people need to be given the power to understand the width and breadth of not only their religion but other religions. So it's I drove past a Coptic church once and I didn't know what Coptic meant, so I go and look it up. and say, okay, so God is divine, or God is divine and human. Well, that's going to make your head spin for a while. And so I, I think if people were learn to see how their religion approaches a question like that, and then they could decide for themselves where they come down on it, um, they could have conversations like ours, but not between believers and non-believers, but among believers
Mm.
as they explore their path forward.
You know, Jim, I definitely love that you actually worry about in this case, I would say the Christian faith to be deeper in their thinking. I love that. I agree completely with you in that respect. So, well, Jim, thank you very much for being with me. It has been fantastic. I really hope that you can join me in the future for another good conversation. And for those of you that are watching, thank you very much. And as you know, as I said before, if you would like to connect with Ask Amonda, you can do it by sending an email to askamondanashville@gmail.com. You can go to the website as well, askamonda.com. And of course, this is going to be also posted as a podcast episode. You can go to iTunes and Google Play and go to the search bar and type Ask Amonda. You'll find it there. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Jim, for being with
Thank
us
you.
today.
I'm
And I'll
sorry?
see you soon with another conversation.
Great. Good night.